group apparently who killed the man who brought the Talmud Emmanuel to Billy. Now there'll be a little bit more on that later on. But there's an attempt on his life by the Israelis, and there are 2 more attempts on his life by a Nazi group which is hiding out in Brazil that has their own flying disc. They're after Billy also. Apparently this group in Brazil had a flying disc based on the knowledge from the Germans after World War II. They also had a captured extraterrestrial disc which the Pleiadians found out about and destroyed, so they would no longer have the use of. One other little interesting thing here, when Billy was taking a ride with Semjase once and being able to take pictures of Venus and Mercury and so forth, she had mentioned something strange about the size of Mercury. And Billy asked her to reiterate that, and she said yes, that the core of Mercury is a metal core, and it has so much mass to it that it's actually pulling the surface in. Mercury is actually shrinking somewhat in size. Okay. Next thing we're going to get into is the pictures taken by Billy of the universe barrier and Jupiter. He was having a lot of problems actually with those. People were claiming that they were fakes, that he had taken pictures of drawings in magazines, which is not true. So I'll meet you on the other side and we'll talk all about that. Okay? Jump over there. Okay, welcome back. When we were ending up on the other side, I was telling you that Billy had taken some pictures of the barrier between universes when he was able to take a ride with Semjase on the Great Spacer ship. What had happened is he'd released those pictures. They'd been out in a couple of magazines, and it kind of backfired on him, where all of a sudden, in the middle of the summer in '76, articles are appearing that Billy Meier's a fake, because this picture he took is the same as a picture that appeared in a drawing by NASA, or scientists from NASA, and they're claiming that Billy had taken a picture of this drawing. Well, unfortunately what had happened was no one really paid much attention to the fact that the drawing that he's supposed to have taken a picture of came out in the summer of '76. When in effect Billy took the pictures almost a year before that, back in 1975, in the spring of '75, when he went on the ride on the Great Spacer. But he doesn't have any proof of what day the picture was taken other than his contact notes. Unfortunately, a slide of film, the ones that he took, there was no date on there, and he really couldn't prove it. And he says even if he could, there was a date on part of the roll of the film, but no one was really believing him, and he was very frustrated that the media would actually do that. And he was pointing out some differences too, where in his picture that it differs from the drawing, where the some of the images are different, that the Great Barrier actually was an oval, and in the drawing it's a circle, and that in the drawing there's a what looks to be like a village or a town below the big hole. And in Billy's picture, it's slightly different. So if you look closely, you can see that they're really not exactly the same. One is kind of a caricature of the other, it looks like. So Billy's very frustrated by this. Also, someone is questioning Billy's contact notes. They're saying that the writings of Semjase, the things that she says, sound exactly like the way Billy talks. And they're questioning, whether or not Billy's just making all this up. Well, Billy's discussing this with Semjase because people don't understand exactly how the contact notes were created. When Billy goes home and the contact notes are transmitted to him via a device on the ship, it doesn't come through in language. What actually happens is the device on the ship goes into the subconscious of Semjase, reads the thoughts, transmits the thoughts to Billy, but they come through to Billy, as symbols. Billy, long ago when he was young, was taught this symbol language that's used by the spirit, and it's used in telepathy. And their machines on board the ship transmit like it's telepathy. So Billy receives all of this, and he writes down all these images and shapes, and then he converts them to language. So because he is converting them, he's writing down, he's expressing in his own views what Semjase said and what he said. So the actual writings, the actual sentences and choice of adjectives and words and everything in the contact notes is all Billy's on both sides. Okay? That's why. We're not reading and listening to the actual words and feelings of Semjase. It's actually Billy's interpretation of that. So there's a little difference there. So he thought, well, people aren't going to understand that anyway. They won't believe that that's even possible. So he's getting even a little more frustrated with the entire problem here of being a great prophet. Okay, we're moving up to the 69th contact now, which is Friday, December 10th, 1976. So we're getting close now to 2 years of contacts here. Billy had a question about Easter Island. It's one of the great mysteries here on Earth that's have gone unexplained over the years. If you're not familiar with Easter Island, you may have seen it on some television shows. It's that unusual island out in the ocean that has all these statues of very tall, large people on it that were carved out of some sort of hard stone. It's very difficult to wonder how that may be possible, and there's no explanation. Well, Billy wanted to know what was the secret there of Easter Island. And she says, well, it is a bit unusual. She wanted to remind him that it's been about 13,000 years since the last big colonization of extraterrestrials were actually here. It was during that time period we were coming to the end of the Atlantis move period, just before their Great War. She says there was a semi-Ishwish leader named Vera Kokoha, if I pronounced that right. And he was kind of a greedy, bloodthirsty type. And he liked to set himself up as a true Ishwish, a true god or king of wisdom to the local people. He had the advantage of being very, very tall. He was Illyrian, and he and his followers were around 11 meters tall, which puts them at 30 to 35 feet tall. So they're very big, and to the then developing Earth human beings, I suppose they could pretty much have their own way and do whatever they want. He was actually quite cruel, kind of a dictator type. And he and his followers took over the city of Tiwanaku, which is about 4,000 meters high. It's a city high up in the mountains. They took that over as well as they took over the island, which we now call Easter Island. He then settled with his guards, called the cherubs or cherubims, on an isle called Mot. It became called Mot because Mot was the word in the old language that meant birds. And his guards, so to speak, around him were like these bird-like creatures that protected him. So a rather strange-looking lot here of 11-meter-tall Lyrians protected by bird-like creatures called cherubs. They settled his spot of rule, as I say, on the island of Mot. And that's where he kind of controlled his little kingdom. Well, the local people that were living there on Easter Island were trained in the use of the high technologies that these Lyrians had. And this is how they came about to build these great stone statues that are there. The Lyrians provided them with their high-tech tools, and a society started flourishing there for a period of time. The locals then, in tribute to these great gods who brought them all this wonderment and so forth, began to create these statues like primitive people will do to worship their gods. The statues were made out of the stones from the lava walls that were nearby. Well, what happened was, she says, a plague of some kind hit the giants, and they fled the earth, leaving and taking all of their technology behind with them. They're not sure exactly what happened to them. It's believed that because of the illness, they may quite possibly have died in their ships just out in the free space, causing their ships to just wander aimlessly or crash into a sun or a star system or something. They think that's probably the best possibility of what happened. Because after they left, there was no indication of whatever happened to them after that. The locals that were left behind suddenly found themselves without leadership and without technology. They were just left. So in order to try to get their gods to come back to take care of them and again take care of their lives, they thought it'd be a good idea to finish the statues and pay tribute again to these gods and hope that they would come back. Well, they didn't have the technology that they had before to build them, so they had to just finish the ones that they had already made. And they didn't actually finish them, that's the wrong word. What they did was they went to the lava pits and got some red earth and fashioned hats out of this red earth, and put them on the statues that they'd already built, hoping that would appease the gods so they might come back. It's really quite unexplainable why they decided on putting hats on the statues, but they did. Apparently, Vera Kokoha during his reign sometime, somehow news or word of his reign and his civilization here on Earth became known to a race of people in the Andromeda constellation, not the Andromeda galaxy. So in the Andromeda constellation, a small group of people knowing about this, they came to Earth 2,568 years ago. And they apparently landed in a similar area, knowing of Kokoha's reign. They were there for about 20 years, and they were the people who, actually they built up a pretty big society down there in South America, and they were the people who founded actually electrical current and electrical energy, and to build these cities up, they used these energy centers with cables under the ground. And when you see the lines of Nazca and so forth down there, these lines that are under the ground, they built those. Those are tube channels, Semjase calls them, which she says, remarkably, no one understands them today. And what they are, there are tubes below the ground that carried electrical current somehow to provide to the, the people of the times, and that was built by these beings from the Andromeda constellation. After about 20 years, though, apparently, they somehow were stricken with the same sort of illness they believed that the earlier Kokoha followers were, and they also fled. They're not sure about the illness, but it's kind of unusual in that area that both these ET groups would come down with some sort of illness which would force them to leave. Okay, there was a splinter group of the Hyperboreans. We talked about the Hyperboreans once before, who lived in the Greenland area, and these were giants. They colonized all of the different continents of the planet, because Billy had a question about Greek mythology, the large people, the Cyclops, the Titans, and some of the dwarfs like Hercules. Dwarfs like Hercules, but dwarfs and Titans like Hercules. And she said, yes, these were primarily people descendants of the Hyperboreans, and then quite a few of them were very large. Hercules was 3 meters tall. A meter now is roughly just a little bit more than 3 feet. It's like 3 feet and an inch. So when you can round all these meters off, just multiply them by 3, and that would give you a rough idea of the footage. Hercules then was about 9 feet tall. Noah was about 3 meters 10 high, so he would be probably around 11 feet tall, something like that. Adam, when he was created by Semjase, the science leader, he was about almost 5 meters tall, so he was somewhere around 14, 15 feet tall. Gilgamesh, the Sumerian god, was very tall, 7.5 meters, so we're looking at over 20 feet tall here. The giants of the yesteryear, though, after staying on Earth for a while and breeding, they slowly degenerated themselves down in size. So even though many of these great tall titans had bred themselves in with the Earth people, that the Earth genetic slowly degenerated the size of the people as well the planet itself, because the atmospheric pressure on a planet and the sun have a lot to do with the size that you're going to grow here, because that affects, of course, the pull on the bones and so forth, how strong your bones can build and how big you can be. So after a period of time, even these giants of yesteryear, their offspring degenerated down just to being the size that was in accordance with the size of the planet. There was a question about a person's name. Like Billy wanted to know, if a person's name, how it is chosen, and is it important? And she said, yes, it is, that a person's name should reflect several things. One, his knowledge and his abilities, as well as his level of evolution. If not, if a person is bearing a name that is not right for them, it can cause confusion in their life. Interesting idea, huh? As an observant, she pointed out that one of the people in Billy's group, Jacobus, whose name is Jacob, she says, here's a man with a particular problem because that's the wrong name for him. Because of that, it creates confusion. He overburdens himself with thoughts on dangerous ideas which are not normally characteristic for him, and they give trace of that to the name. She says, for instance, Eduard means preserver of the treasure in the old language. By the way, this old language they refer to is the language they figured out that within all spirit forms of the universe, this symbol language that Billy uses all the time, it's a very accurate language where the symbols actually portray the true meaning of what things mean to the spirit. We have words like tree, car, milk, run, and, this language that we've made up called English. but the sound of these words, these phrases and the sounds are different to the spirit. The spirit doesn't hear them very accurately, and quite often there can be some confusion between the sounds that you make and the way that the spirit actually interprets them. So the ancient Lyrians had figured out